All right, so I'm gonna try and do this where it's just audio only and record some stuff where I'm just talking about PT stuff. I have a lot of time on Mondays now where I'm driving, so you'll hear like some just noises of the road, my turn signal, different things like that. I didn't want to do video because like that could be distracted in my driving, and I thought it would be better just to do audio only. It's pretty easy to record, right, and upload it and get things to work that way. But anyways, if you don't, I guess, know who I am, my name is Jacob Templar. I'm better known on Instagram as strength and evidence _ physio. Post a lot about rehab and fitness related topics. I'm chief science officer for ATP Performance LLC. Let's see, I'm a licensed physical therapist in the state of New York, practice in New York at a hospital system. I've been practicing for like 7 years. I have an orthopedic board certification, things like that. I'm also a co-owner and founder of Pragmatic Rehab Principles, a company that's dedicated to mentoring physical therapists, chiropractors, and other health professionals on musculoskeletal related topics in rehab. And the thing is, like, some of the videos that I wanted to do on Instagram and things like that they won't do well on that platform. They're just not. That's just not a place where people go to really see like long form content. And I think on like YouTube or podcasts and different things like that, people more often will go there to see this kind of thing or listen to it, right? So I just think it's better, and I can just talk about what are my thoughts on a topic, or give a little bit longer of an explanation without necessarily having to coordinate a time with somebody else to do recordings and things like that. So if I start to ramble, that will be why. This might be half an hour, 20 minutes, I don't know. We'll see where we get to, right? But the idea would be too is that if it's on YouTube or things like that, you can leave comments or questions that maybe I can look at ahead of time and have in my mind and talk about into the next week, potentially about like practical implications, like different things and techniques you can do with patients or implement right in the clinic, hopefully the next day, right? So today too, and lately I've been doing a lot of posts on back pain. And I've done some posts before about like how do we help get like buy-in with patients and exercise dosage and things like that. And that's largely too because like when we look at back pain outside of red flags, and it's for some reason kind of controversial to say this, but a lot of back pain is non-specific, meaning that if there's no like true like tissue that we can source as being like that's the reason for the symptoms starting to begin with, versus like specific instances where like we know something is maybe contributing or causing that person's back pain. For example, with spondylolisthesis, which is like a fracture of your back where it's symptomatic, cancer, infection, aortic aneurysm, ectopic pregnancy. There could be a long list of like tuberculosis could cause back pain, different things like that, right? Where that is a non-rehab management thing, where that's not something that I should be seeing the person for in my clinic, because that the reason why they have back pain is a specific cause in that case, and that's not something that I treat, and they're not going to get better. If anything, that could be life-threatening with some loads if it's not taken care of by a person who does know how to properly treat it and address it. So we've been talking about like how to get by with those people, because back pain's complicated. People usually want some kind of explanation about what's going on with them. They want to know what they what are you going to do about it? And like, how long is this maybe going to take? And back pain, for the most part, does have a good prognosis. Um, Depends on how you look at it, right? Like, there is a high reoccurrence rate for back pain after the first initiation, but like, it's hard to prevent back pain from starting based on the research that we do have on it. So first instances of back pain are pretty hard to prevent. Like, we don't have good data that says, yeah, we're pretty good at not allowing this to happen. Like, a lot of companies invest a lot of time in ergonomics programs and body mechanics training and lifts and different things like that. Like, especially like hospitals, right? They have these different lifts and bed sheets and some insurance companies, if you have a workers' compensation insurance for your hospital, like, they'll straight up, if they can't find evidence that you were potentially using some of those things, like, they may try and refuse to pay for that claim. But what we're seeing was brought up in the Lancet series and a couple other meta-analysis that I've looked at about like risk factors for back pain. Like, we don't really stop it from starting in the first place, and that's probably because things like biomechanics, lifting, and different biological factors are only a part of the equation. They're not the whole picture when it comes to back pain. There's something like 310 unique factors or more that could be related to why somebody develops back pain. And only a segment of that is going to be based on how you move or the ways that you move, right? The biomechanics versus like personal factors, predispositions, and genetics, and your mood and your social relationships and stress, how much you sleep, how much you're able to, how your nutrition is. Do you maybe have some kind of deficiency that you're unaware of, or high blood pressure, or hormonal difference that's rare and maybe not even worth like testing for? A lot of things like that will contribute then to back pain. That's some of the stuff that I even talk with patients about. Like, we'll talk about, okay, well, when did this start? How did it happen? Was there a specific event? And a lot of times, most of the patients that I have come in don't have a specific event. I'll ask them about their history. Like, they have a history of cancer. Do they get night pain? Do they have, make sure they're not peeing and pooping themselves or having numbness, tingling around their, genital region and things like that. You just want to make sure that they're obviously there to you for what you treat do well. But then from there, it's like, okay, well, we want to be having a conversation with these people too, because we think about back pain and just a lot of pains in general in our medical systems. There's a large emphasis on tests and measures, scans, and blood work and things like that, but that only gives us so much information versus like talking to a person, right? How many times can we maybe talk to a person and that really tells us a lot of what we need to know about what's going on with them, from how that issue behaves, like how long is it there for, how irritable is it, what kind of activities or situations or contexts do they feel more pain in, how does it affect their life, how is it impacting their social life, their work, their sometimes like their sex life. I have patients bring that up. Different things like that, right? Like all these, what areas are this or is this meaningfully impacting them? And we don't know, and we can't tell until we ask somebody. And sometimes too, because scans don't always tell us what we need to know, or we can't source on there just what's wrong with them. As long as, again, there's no red flag, we have to talk to them to know what's wrong, what's going on, how does this affect you, right? So we would go through and you want to ask them open-ended questions. Then a good idea is to summarize back to them, like what's going on, right? Like, okay, so let me get this clear. You said, that you have more pain when you do this, this, and this, and when you do these types of activities, it bothers you, and maybe when you do this, you get like a tingling down your leg, or you described it as this, this, this. Um, because a lot of times too, people aren't very like listened to, and they can't. It's not always like that specific health providers' um, fault in a way. Like there are system-wide issues with like length of visits and appointments and whatnot that do impact how much time you can. Like some providers have to actually take a good history. But sometimes you're the first person that's given them an opportunity to share their story, and that can be therapeutic as well, and make them feel better. And then, if there's areas of education that need to be improved on, that's where you can then address that, right? Because you've developed a specific relationship with that person. Because I would say probably the biggest things that people want to know is that, do they need a scan, or they come in and they want a scan? Because they want to know specifically what's going on, which we know maybe doesn't matter as much, but they don't know that. And all they know is that they have pain. It limits them. They're not able to engage with all the activities they would normally engage with. And they want to know what's going on. And the way that most people conceptualize that is, I need to have a scan. I need an x-ray, an MRI, whatever it is, right? So there's that. And if we don't take the time to get to know somebody, it can be problematic when we then go to educate them or do certain things or offer certain solutions, right? Because what if the solution that you have to offer doesn't align with what their values and goals are, what they think they need, right? How might we get that buy-in when we haven't taken the time to listen to what they are saying, how this is affecting them, what's going on, and felt like somebody actually took the time to maybe understand them in particular, right? And like the reflection can be a good way, just asking a lot of open-ended questions, your body language, like seeming interested and paying attention to them and asking follow-up questions. Using their language, like how do they describe what's going on? Like, do they say that it's pain? Is it soreness? Is it sharp? Whatever it is, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to ask them that, but pick up on the way that they describe it and then start to adopt a little bit their language of how they describe the issues going on for them. And that'll go a long way to making them reassured that you're actually listening, rather than just kind of in the room with them and hearing them, which happens a lot more than we think. And, not interrupting them. Like, I do find where I will sometimes interrupt people, but then I stop and ask them, and I'll even say like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I thought you were finished, because maybe there was like a pause or whatever. And based off of what they said, I might have like a follow-up or clarification. And if they start going in, I'll just be like, okay, sorry, go ahead. Because I want them to know that like I care about what they have to say, because that's going to matter a little bit more than what my ideas are at the time, right? Especially when we're developing a relationship. If they feel like they can trust you, then they're also going to tell you more. They're going to be more honest with you and potentially more able to align with you, right? But there's the thing with like too is like, as we go through our examination and have the treatment that we offer, right? Some people just might not want what we have to offer. And I think sometimes we get caught up with the idea that they have to want what we have to offer versus like us being okay with them like saying, that's not what I want. And I think giving an informed consent of like, this is what I do well, this is what I like to do, this is what I know how to do, maybe like X, Y, and Z, like it has these effects, but like they could come in and want to get needled or whatever, and like it may not be always in our best interest to try and convince them all the time that like, nope, this is what you need to do. You need to do manual like how I do it, and exercise how I do it, or whatever. I think we can sometimes convert them to be like, if we gain their trust, say like, well, this is what I would do. But I think at the end of the day, for informed decision making, we kind of have to sometimes put the ball in their court and see what they want. Like some people just want to be told what to do, right? And some people are going to want to say like, well, this is what I had in mind. I was hoping it would offer this. And you could say, well, I don't do that well, but here's the name of X, Y, and Z person that I know that does that, that maybe could help you out. So those are some things to consider, right? Versus then we, start to get into the examination portion of things. And I would say a lot of times what I do is screen like neurologically, like what's going on with that person. Like, because with back pain, like some people might not even be aware that they have altered sensation or reflex changes, or like weakness could be subtle in ways that they don't realize during daily functions. So, I test that stuff. You could do other tests, but unless somebody has something in the history that, suspects, like makes you be more wary of a certain specific thing, I wouldn't say you need to do that. Like I check general ranges of motion too, like how do they do like bending back first, bending forward, bending side to side? Do they get pain with that? Sometimes the pain just when you go down, is it when you come up? You have to kind of assist yourself back up if you're bending down. When you go back, is it like pain through the whole motion? It's just an end of the motion. And then like how does that affect if they have like preferred symptoms? Like does that do anything to that area? Because we know that maybe like centralization, it's not always like the best treatment modifier according to literature, but it does impact like prognosis. Like if somebody can have centralization, it's pretty much just if the symptoms will change to be variable, then that's what will tell you they might have a more favorable prognosis. Oh, and that's where too in the history I'll get an idea of like, okay, like what positions and movements bother them. If you want to think about it a little bit more biomechanically, like that's where those types of things will tell you that, right? Like walking is a little bit more depending on how somebody walks, right? Extension bias for our lumbar spine. Could be rotational again, or based on like how somebody walks. Sitting, prolonged standing, standing at the sink, folding laundry, like some stuff like that's going to be like more flexion biased, right? So they may have intolerances to being in like flexed positions or postures, bending down, picking stuff up, dressing their legs, like that's positioned more into flexion versus like overhead reaching, stuff like that is going to be more extension. Do they have trouble like rolling in bed or getting up after periods of time of sitting? Does anything cause peripheralization of their symptoms, or like cause symptoms to produce more down their leg or into their extremities in general? Do they feel like they get really stiff when symptoms are worse? Like those are all symptoms that, to me, like things like manual or repeated movements may be helpful and useful. And we want to think about this in a little bit of a different context, I think, more of lately, because I tend to find that I'm thinking about it a little differently. Instead of being like I need to control and get rid of symptoms always, like it's about developing wins and confidence for people sometimes, rather than like, oh, you need to abolish all the symptoms always at every moment, all the time, constantly. You can't ever have symptoms down in your leg, stuff like that. Because I think also we tend to see, like, as we try and control symptoms or ignore symptoms more, that's when we see it starts to creep more into other activities, that previously may not have bothered you before, because you're heightening anticipation and kind of teaching the system. If we think of like pain as an alarm system, kind of teaching it like, hey, this is bad. I don't like that. This is making me substantially change my behavior. So kind of almost give, in my mind, I don't know how true this is, or people could disagree. You're kind of teaching the system to be more aware of certain things and positions and thinking that they're bad and being almost afraid to do them. So it kind of reinforces that versus like, if we just think of it as like, okay, you don't have to avoid things and you can do these symptoms, these movements sometimes to help with symptoms if you need it. Then I think that's a valuable tool. And McKenzie and like repeated movements or augmented stretching that maybe you do like a manual technique and you can teach them how to do something similar. That might also be a part of graded exposure, right? You're having them do something that's like uncomfortable maybe, or a position that they might not normally get into. And then you've given them now maybe a framework to go off of to say, well, if you have these symptoms with this is good. This is maybe neutral, and this is maybe, I don't say like bad, because like MDT, McKenzie used the traffic light system where like red flags is like loss of motion, peripheralization. Yellow is like no real change, like maybe increase while they're doing something, but not any worse afterwards, or decreases during the activity, but it's not really any better afterwards, or they don't really have a change of motion or symptom location. Green light is like it centralizes, localizes more towards the back, get more motion, get more or less intensity of the pain, different things like that, right? Like, I don't really say red flag is like it's bad for you, like you're not causing damage. I would say that that's just something like, it's exposure and tolerance. Like they may not be ready for that yet. Like your body's just saying like, hey, you know what? Like we're maybe just not ready for this, and it's not that you cause harm to yourself, but I'm letting you know I don't really like this right now. I don't really want you to do this more, and okay, we'll take note of that, and then we'll see. The way I might do it is like expose them. How long was that exposure to that? Like, was it 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Was it like one repetition? Was it multiple times? And then say, okay, now we have a baseline. Like you can do X, Y, Z for this long before you feel like your symptoms become to the point where they're intolerable. And I even tell people it's okay to have pain with activity. But the thing is, like, how does it affect you afterwards, right? Because if we're thinking about graded exposure and gradually getting into things more, I would say that we want to toe that line between exposure, but also developing confidence and comfort. So they have these rules that we kind of like made up to help them understand what's going on and give them at least a framework to go off of, right? But also with that, sometimes I'll blank it, so it'll take me a little bit longer. Okay, so we toe that line between exposure, where like the pain is increased, and like to a tolerable level, like talking about pain is bad. What is your experience with this? But then also, how long afterwards does that pain last? Does that pain continue to linger? And I kind of come up with an arbitrary number, like between 15, 30 minutes, it could be an hour. You could kind of pick a time frame, right? What would be probably acceptable to you? If you did something and it hurt, how long would you think that it's okay for it to hurt for before it goes back to normal, right? And based on the irritability of that, can suggest like how much we expose or push into that, right? So if they're pushing into stuff though, and they keep having worse and worse pain, and it makes them more and more fearful of doing stuff, less confident in movement in their body, and maybe what you've given them, I don't know if that's a good thing, just from that perspective. And then is if it limits what they can do afterwards, well, what kind of quality of life is that, right? Like we are trying to improve their quality of life and ability to engage with more activities. And now if they did some exercise that we gave them, and now they're able to less engage with their life for a substantial period of time, okay, I think we need to just readjust, reevaluate what we're looking at and like what we're thinking. So that's my thought about that. Um, in an evaluation, circling back, I might also want to talk to them about what activities are they doing, how are they doing it, can you show me how you're doing it, what kind of loads they need to be exposed to, like how much they need to lift for their job, they're, lifting their pet, lifting a child, lifting household objects. And then we might test, like, and see, like, okay, you say this, and it's not that I don't believe you, but I want to see it, right? Because sometimes we can also see that with loading and like lifting and stuff like that, that we can just have even small modifications of how they can do it, and it could have a big effect on how they feel while they do it. And it's not necessarily because like I said, biomechanics is a piece of the puzzle, right? And it's not that we have to completely stop how using them and changing them. Just we reframe how we think about them, right? They're not the end all be all, and like we need, like you can't stop your spine from flexing when we move in certain positions, but that doesn't mean you can't potentially like change or vary how much occurs in those positions. So like if they do a hip hinge or is a squatting pattern maybe even more comfortable. And it's not to change it to tell them that this is bad, like you can't do it that way. It's to change it in a way that they can re-engage with valued activities and goals again. So you see how that narrative has changed, right? I'm not doing this because the way you're lifting is bad. I'm doing this because you have right now, it's just not comfortable for you to do that, and you're hesitant to do things that way. All right, so let's change how you're doing this. Don't hold your breath. Maybe breathe a little bit more. Try and relax. Don't necessarily tighten and contract your core when you're doing that. Like let your body just kind of move how it wants to move. And then let's try again. Okay, now maybe we change how much like hip hinge they go into, or how much bending you get from the thoracic spine, or in their cervical spine, or how much they bend their knees, or instead of doing a hinge pattern, we do more of a squat pattern or a lunge pattern, right? And then they go, oh, wow, that feels way better when I do that. Well, okay, now we've found just a way for them to view movement now as safe again and have more opportunities to engage with their life, and they feel better about it. Okay, so, and then you might want to ask them and reflect, okay, well, why is it that when we do things this way, you think that it feels better? And that can be powerful too, is like going through like thought experiments with people. Because behavior change and belief change doesn't just happen from us talking to them. We have to kind of show them stuff. And when we learn things in school, right? How much did you probably learn just by being talked to in lecture one time, right? Like maybe we can learn some stuff that way, but to truly ingrain things into our memory and make that part of our working memory, we have to be exposed to it constantly and kind of also have to reflect on it. Like, what do we think about that? How would we explain that to somebody, right? So having these repeat exposures and new ways of thinking about things and stuff like that, you're also not necessarily challenging them outright. Like you're not telling them they're wrong, but they're kind of coming to that conclusion on their own. They go, oh, well, maybe that isn't really that bad for me, even though, so-and-so said that it was, right? So you haven't challenged their belief in a verbal way, in a way that might cause them to just feel like you didn't really listen to them, right? You actually took them through an active thing, had them do it, and then to go, okay, well, what do you think about this then? right? And so that's another way to get better buy-in. So there's that. And as I'm going through here, I'm going through like what my examination look like, what are some interventions like, and I want to tie my interventions towards what their goals are, what are their values, what do they want to be able to do again, what do they want out of their life, what was their prior level of activity, right? And then we scale from there. Like, are there certain positions that are harder? Are there certain movements, and can we tie certain exercises that maybe I look at things a lot of times as exposure. I do use repeated movements like I talked about, but then I look at exposure, breaking down movements into parts, exposing them more to that in a way that they can develop confidence, comfortability, maybe more strength, maybe more endurance, whatever it is, right? And I don't think there's really a right or wrong way to do that, because there's not really a lot of evidence that says like certain types of exercise is better than another. So it's like, what do you feel more comfortable modifying and changing? And then how does that relate to what this person is seeing you for? And I think tying it to their goals constantly. We are doing this because you identified that your goal is to be able to, bend down and pick up your 1-year-old son or daughter, right? Or your cat or your small dog or your laundry, whatever it is. And you can't do that now, but we're going to do this because it should help improve, the tolerance to being in that position, or we're using the muscles that you need to get into that position. And over time, we may see that, okay, we expose you to this more and it feels better to do it, right? So going back to that's, where buy-in comes in. That's where education comes in, right? I think giving them permission and space to be like, tell us a lot of these things and ask us the questions will go a long way. And then it's tailored to what they want, which also in a lot of qualitative research and different things has been suggested is like, that's what they want. They want individually tailored information. So how does it pertain to their life, their circumstances, what they do, stuff like that. One of the good cases I had recently, even, this is not back pain, it's knee pain, but I'm working with this woman now. She's like in her late 20s, was previously like a track athlete when she was in high school and a little bit into college. And she has 2 kids now. She works a corporate job. She's like an HR director for a nursing home. I guess that's corporate, right? And she's having issues with knee pain. Previously had Lyme disease. She has a 1-year-old child at home and a 5-year-old child as well. And, she likes to run. Running is like beneficial for her, but she previously had pelvic pain. She now has knee pain. And so what we would describe as maybe like patellofemoral pain syndrome. We went over a couple things on the first day. I gave her some exercises to engage with, and I asked, is that what you're looking for? Here's the things that I think is what's going on. Here's what I think your prognosis is. Here's what I think you can do at home for it. And here's what I think I can help you with. And so she's very bought in that way. But then the second visit, she's like, I want to, run. I'd like to be able to go back to the gym. And in the second visit, I think I saw her like only 48 hours later. She's like, I'm feeling a lot better already, and I feel like less stiffness, less pain, less problems with like some things she had talked about on the evaluation. And she talked about like running, and like a lot of patients will even say or ask, like, is it safe for me? Can I do that? And I go, I don't know, let's try it. Like, and I say it kind of like that. Like, I'm not like afraid to let them do things. And I go, well, let's find out together. Right. And I think that helps a little bit, because I think so before Peter O'Sullivan, I think, said this, is like, I heard his PTA that I worked with, Justin, um, said to me, and I think a student that we had at the time, he's like, if you're afraid of pain, then they're going to be afraid of pain. So if you're scared that they're going to hurt themselves or do something, then they're going to be afraid that they're going to do something. They're going to cause an issue. And I've heard Peter O'Sullivan say that too recently. So just don't be afraid to challenge them and like try stuff. Like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, especially if they have chronic pain, like, or even in acute cases, like your body's got a lot of protective mechanisms, especially if you have chronic pain. It's less and less likely that the tissue is the problem. The tissue is going to break, and more likely that they're going to have an oversensitivity that's going to prevent them from continuing the activity, right? So we were like, I don't know, let's find out, and had her do the treadmill, and like she got to like, I was like, well, let's try like, I started with like the activities at like 5-10 minutes, especially like she's like, I haven't run before I was pregnant, because she had pelvic girdle pain and just like now having knee pain. Um, okay, let's do this. And she did it, and she's like, yeah, I felt a little uncomfortable, and I'm like, yeah, you should. You haven't run in like, over a year, almost 2 years. Like it should feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's like, does it feel like, you ask them to reflect, like, is it uncomfortable? Does it hurt? Like, how does it feel now? Like, okay, it's fine. Okay, we're good. Like, let's start doing that more. And it kind of gives them confidence then to, start testing some of these things because you've shown them now a way to do that, and they can start kind of experimenting on their own. So you could take that into back pain. Like, oh, I haven't been able to. Some people will talk about they have back pain while they're running. Okay, well, let's run a little bit, see how you feel. How much can you do? Then can we grade it from there? Okay, you get pain when you bend and lift, but like, how long does it last? Like, how much can you lift? And then sometimes it might be just doing like modifications for the time being, right? We're just kind of teaching people different ways to re-engage with activities and cope with these things as stuff gets better, and sometimes just by like giving them a way to test it and go through things on their own goes a long way to helping them feel better a lot faster, right? Because the biggest thing too is that you feel like you're so out of control with everything that's happening and how it's affecting your life and your identity. You might have a certain like, oh, it's going to take forever, and we could show them that might not be the case. Even like somebody I had come in today, this guy had a pretty catastrophic injury too. Like, he started his first day at work and went in, and it was just getting shown around their warehouse and stuff. And he's like a driver, like a CDL driver for delivery and stuff. Just getting shown around their warehouse, and while he was in their warehouse, like a metal like framework that they had in the warehouse came down and fell on top of him, like slammed into his head, and he had like a concussion, started vomiting, and actually like couldn't end up working in a job. And he's now, because of that, he doesn't have a job. He's got 3 kids. He's married. Family's homeless now because he wasn't able to work and to help pay for the bills that he needs to pay for. And things like that. But like today we went through some stuff. I did an eval with him. He didn't really, the stuff that I gave him to do at home didn't really seem to be helping much. I was like, all right, we'll regress that. I got him a little bit into some cardio work today, using like an upper arm bike. Say it was like, okay, I want to see like what your level of tolerance is for using your arm stuff, because he has neck and back pain. And we get done with that and just go over to an area where we can start doing stuff. And he's like, wow, I already feel like better just like from when we were over there to over here. And then I showed him like, different, and he'd asked me about like cupping and needling and stuff like that. And I was like, I think that stuff can help in a short term. And anything that somebody does to you is only probably going to be short term. But, let me show you some stuff that you might be able to do. And showed him a few things. We did a few different movements. did repeated movements with him, and he had from his like around the knees, his lower back. His team was reduced by half. And I told him, like, hey, now you can more of a say what is use this analogy that Cam Fowler and his group, dynamic movement or DMR move. I always get it wrong, like the dynamic movement rehabilitation, or dynamic principles. The analogy I kind of learned from them, they talk about like elevating the riders. So like, or you think about horse. Sometimes the horse is a little bit easier for people to understand, I think. And this is where changing your analogies and your stories, I think we're really at different we're like, okay, you can ride a horse, right? But if that horse is a wild horse, like, are they gonna want you to stay on it? Are they gonna do is it gonna do what it wants to do? Versus like think of in your conscious mind and self as like the rider, right? And we can train that animal, whatever it is, to do those things. But if certain circumstances happen, our body in that animal is gonna do what it wants to do anyways, and what it thinks is maybe best for its own survival. So your body's going to make up all these rules based on content, based on emotions, social relationships, a lot of stuff like that. Right? And what we can see though is we can't coax it and nudge it to certain directions over time, get it to do more of what you want to happen. So I go, I'm not necessarily having you do these because I think you need to control the pain, but I think it'll help you to gain more confidence in movement and your ability to move, and you feel like you have something now where you have more of a say over what gets to happen on this journey, rather than your body just being like, this is what's happening. So this is how like I might add some of the interventions, right? And I go through stuff with people like patterns of lifting, and I just worked on, I had a paper published that's more of a pragmatic paper with Nick R that we had in NSCA, and because we're comfortable with lifting, we're lifting weights. That's what we're comfortable with. That's what we know. We know how to relate that function into activities that people want to do in daily life. So, all right, this is what we're going to write about. Maybe if we were both runners, we would have written about how to work with runners who have back pain and how to adjust an endurance program. But, you can, utilize your knowledge and whatever you're comfortable with to do the same thing. Yeah, so I think that it's important that we bring the patient into some of these decisions too, and ask them, like, is this even feasible for you to do? Do you have access to equipment where you could do this? Is that something that you're even probably gonna do? Do you see yourself doing this at home? Where are you gonna do it? When are you gonna do it? Tell your family this is what you have and what you're gonna do, and how often you're gonna do it. And things like that. And I think all that would go a long way to improve buy-in as well. Because I think that's the biggest thing people have difficulty with. I think some people also have a difficulty choosing the types of exercises. And I think that's something like in the paper is outlined very well about like hinge pattern, squat pattern, overhead press, vertical pull, like so pull-ups, pull-downs, rows, some kind of pressing movement, pulling movement, and that kind of works all major muscle groups and kind of goes through a lot of different patterns. There can be in daily life where we do rotational movements as well, like lunging or whatever. Right, so there's a lot of different things we could do, and then from there, the dosage. I've talked a little bit about that, right? Like we talked about, okay, the dose might be based on what's their tolerance level like, what's I use sometimes those. We outline this too in like irritability. If something is like high irritability, then it's like they can do very minimal stuff, and that leads to them having a lot of pain, discomfort, stiffness, avoidant behaviors, maybe reinforces negative beliefs about their body and pain. And sometimes that's where I might just do really easy things with them, or stuff that doesn't even seem like it's going to affect their back, like walking. You could do calf raises. You could do upper body exercises. You could do. This is where you could do like core exercise, right? I'm not telling them they need to strengthen their core, but I'm like, hey, let's expose those muscles to a little bit of stress and loading, but like you can do this in a way that you feel more comfortable with, and like, hey, I can put like gauge how much stress or how long I hold that contraction, um, right? So you get a little bit more say over what happens here versus having external load. And then, okay, how do you feel with that? And sometimes they feel a lot better. They get more confidence over time. So it's not that core exercises are the demon, like a demon. There's a devil. Mama says there's a devil. If anybody gets my Waterboy reference, but you give them a little bit of a say. Hey, what do you think about doing these? Let's try that. This is why we're doing them. A lot of people think their core is weak anyway. I wouldn't necessarily reinforce that or say like, that's why we're doing them. But that's where some of that stuff comes into play. Where moderate irritability is like you might have them do more constrained movements, right? Like sit to stand versus free squats or box squats or stuff with a machine, or you could use bands at home, different things like that, right? And then the dosage is going to be, I always try and dose stuff depending on like where they're at, like fitness wise, but I still try and progress them towards the ACSM guidelines. I think that's a good place to be. And if we're thinking that we're doing strengthening exercises, we should probably dose it in a way that actually might elicit a strength adaptation, rather than just being like, it's fine to just have people exercise. I think if we're going to say that it's an exercise to improve strength, then it needs to be dosed to improve strength as well. And always start a little bit smaller. Like I usually try to do at least like a couple sets. Depending on what I'm giving them, like could be once a day, because some people just won't remember to do it if it's not once a day. It could be 3 times a week, could be 2 times a week, could be 4 times a week, could be 5 times a week. And I dose it. Yeah, I like to do it like for resistance exercises, do like between like 8 and 15 reps, and then tell them if they can do 15 reps for both the tests, they feel like, oh, I'm confident with that. That was pretty easy. Okay, let's add another set. And then, okay, well, let's try and start back at, 8 reps, work your way back. And then when you could do 15, let's add weight more weight, right? So it gives them some wiggle room too, to see and make those decisions. Like, how confident do I feel? Can I progress this today? Different stuff like that, right? So, hopefully this helps and stimulates some thoughts. I've kind of rambled now for about 50 minutes. I think that covered a lot of different things and topics that within like back pain that I would have liked to talk about before on my page, but like videos, really, if they're not like less than a minute, and sometimes if they're longer than like 10 seconds, they're not going to do well. So you probably listen to this either. We haven't decided yet if it's like I'm definitely going to put this on YouTube. You can listen to it there. Just do stuff while you're doing stuff at home. Let me know if you have any comments. Do you have questions? Do you have other areas you want me to talk about? Right? Because if you leave a comment, I can look at them ahead of time, and then next week talk about that a little bit and bring in some cases and like how might you apply different things in the clinic right away. And hopefully this helps you to figure out some of that stuff now to shorten that learning curve a little bit. This is not meant to be, I should have put this at the front, but this is not meant to be explicitly taken as medical advice. This is for entertainment purposes. and specifically entertainment purposes, preferentially for healthcare providers, to help them to kind of maybe learn a little bit, be entertained. Not that my voice is that entertaining. Yeah, so kind of wrapping up there. Make sure you check all of the socials, ATP performance, pragmatic rehab principles, strength and evidence _ physio. I'm on there, and Instagram. I'm on YouTube now. I'm on LinkedIn. I also do have a Twitter. Not that I use it a lot, just to try and cover all the bases. I'd rather have you either follow me on Instagram or add me on LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook page also, but I'm not about like adding people on my Facebook that I don't really know, just because that's where I post more stuff about my family and for my family and close friends, to separate things out a little bit. Yeah, so hopefully this wasn't too annoying. Hopefully you can actually hear me, and that the audio in the back, like the road noises and stuff, were okay. If you learned something, let me know in the comments too. If you made it this far, I don't know, leave a comment about your favorite comedy movie, because I like to put references to those in my memes and stuff like that. All right. So that's all I have to say in closing, and I will hopefully see you guys around in the next coming week.